Okay, let's journey back 2.5 millennia to a battle that has become the absolute stuff of legend. We're talking about a clash so important, so pivotal, that its name is now synonymous with endurance itself. And its outcome? Well, it helped shape the entire course of Western history. This is the incredible story of the Battle of Marathon. Picture this, it's 490 BC. We're on the sun-scorched plains of Marathon, just a stone's throw from Athens. For 5 incredibly tense days, two armies have been just staring each other down. It's a stalemate, and the fate of a city, and maybe, just maybe, an entire civilization is hanging by a thread.
I mean, the stakes could not have been higher. For the Athenians, this wasn't just some battle. This was for everything. It was a fight for their homes, for their families, and for this crazy new idea they were trying out called democracy. And who were they facing? Oh, just the largest, most powerful empire the world had ever seen. No big deal.
And just look at the numbers here. It's staggering. On one side, you've got about 11,000 Greeks, mostly Athenians, with a few allies from a small city called Plataea. And on the other side, the Persian Empire, with something like 25,000 foot soldiers and 1,000 cavalry. It is the classic textbook definition of a David versus Goliath situation.
So this all brings up two massive questions, right? First, why was the mighty Persian Empire parked on a beach in Greece in the first place? And second, the real head-scratcher, how in the world did this tiny, outnumbered Athenian army pull off one of the most unbelievable upsets in military history?
All right, to really get what happened at the battle, we have to rewind a bit and figure out the why. Because this wasn't just some random invasion or grab for territory. For the Persian king, this was personal, really personal.
So here's how it all went down. It really kicks off with something called the Ionian Revolt. You had these Greek city-states over in what's now Turkey, and they decided to rebel against Persian rule. And here's the key part. Athens sent ships and soldiers to help them out. In 498 BC, they actually helped burn down a major Persian city, Sardis. Now, the revolt was eventually put down, but for the Persians, a line had been crossed. Big time. And the man at the center of all this fury was King Darius I. The burning of his city was more than just a military setback. It was a profound insult, an act of defiance that he absolutely could not and would not let stand. You know, the great historian Herodotus tells this incredible story. He says that when Darius heard the news about Sardis, he took a bow, shot an arrow up into the sky, and basically begged the gods to help him get his revenge on the Athenians. This wasn't just a military operation he was planning, it was a sacred vow. And if you think that's intense, get this. This anecdote is just amazing. Herodotus claims Darius made one of his servants stand before him at every single meal, 3 times, and say, "Master, remember the Athenians." Can you imagine? This wasn't just state policy, it was a deep, burning obsession.
Okay, so that's the why, a king hell-bent on revenge. But what about the how? How did the Athenians, staring down this vengeful superpower, even begin to think they had a chance? So check out this map. Their first move was actually pretty smart and purely defensive. The Athenian army basically sprinted to Marathon and set up a roadblock, blocking the only 2 ways out of the plain. This move effectively trapped the Persians, pinning them against the sea and stopping them from just marching straight to Athens.
But man, were they in a tough spot. They were outnumbered more than 2 to 1. Their city was basically empty, completely undefended, and maybe worst of all, their call for help to Sparta, the most feared army in Greece, had been answered with, "Sorry, we'll be there later." The Spartans were in the middle of a religious festival and said they couldn't march until the full moon, which was days away. So with the clock ticking, one of the Athenian generals, a guy named Miltiades, comes up with this totally radical, almost crazy plan. He said, let's forget the standard playbook. Let's make our centers super thin and pile all our extra soldiers on the sides, on our flanks. This was a huge, huge gamble. If it failed, they'd be crushed instantly.
Which, of course, brings up the million-dollar question, right? If the unstoppable Spartan army is on its way, why not just wait? Why risk everything in an attack before your backup arrives? It doesn't seem to make any sense.
Well, the best theory we have boils down to something that wasn't there on the battlefield, the Persian cavalry. There's this later source that mentions a signal was given, something like the cavalry are away. The thinking is that the Athenians saw the Persian horsemen getting back on their ships. The plan was probably to sail around the coast and hit the undefended city of Athens by sea. For the Athenians, this was it. This was their one shot.
The Persians' deadliest weapon was off the board, even if just for a little while. It was now or never.
And just like that, the decision was made. The Greeks were going to attack. So let's break down exactly how this unbelievably desperate gamble actually went down on the day. First up, the charge. The Athenians ran across nearly a mile of open ground, straight into a storm of Persian arrows. Second, just as planned, their intentionally weak center buckled and fell back. It looked like a disaster. But then, phase 3, Miltiades's insane gamble paid off. The super strong Greek flanks just shattered the Persian lines facing them, and then they turned inward like a pair of pincers, surrounding the best Persian troops. And finally, phase 4, total chaos. The Persians, trapped and getting hit from 3 sides, panicked. They broke and ran for their lives back to the ships. And this right here really gets to the heart of why the Greek plan worked. The Persian army, on the left, was mostly made of missile troops, archers, guys with javelins. They were deadly from a distance. But the Greek hoplite, on the right, was a walking tank, a heavily armored specialist built for one thing: close quarters, brutal fighting. Once the Greeks closed that gap, the lightly armored Persians just didn't stand a chance.
The final tally, it's just unbelievable. Herodotus tells us that 6,400 Persians died on that field. And the Greeks? Just over 200. The numbers alone tell you just how complete, how absolutely devastating this victory was. So, an incredible victory, for sure. But the real story, the reason we're still talking about it today, is what happened after. Because Marathon wasn't just the end of an invasion. In so many ways, it was a beginning. Honestly, the impact of this single day is hard to overstate. It completely shattered the myth that the Persian Empire was invincible. It proved that Athens could win on its own, without having to wait for Sparta. And crucially, it saved their little experiment in democracy from being wiped out. This victory allowed Athens to blossom into its golden age, giving us the philosophy, the art, the ideas that are literally the bedrock of Western civilization. At the end of the day, Marathon was the spark. The war against Persia would drag on for years, but this was the moment. This was the point where the Greeks started to believe, deep down, that they could actually win. It was a psychological turning point that changed everything. And that really leaves us with this huge, mind-bending question. What if they had lost? What if the Persian cavalry hadn't been on the ships? What if Miltiades' gamble had failed? Would all those ideas, democracy, philosophy, drama, have been extinguished before they ever really had a chance to shine? We'll never know for sure, but it really makes you think about how much of our world was riding on the shoulders of a few thousand men on a dusty plain 2,500 years ago.